Sanders crushes Clinton in New Hampshire. So Hillary sends a memo to call in her black reinforcements, to which Michelle Alexander responds, "Hold on, Hillary, not so fast." Ta-Nehisi Coates says he's voting for Sanders, but not endorsing Sanders, whatever the hell that means. And the Congressional Black Caucus thinks young black voters are naive to support Bernie Sanders. All of this we'll be discussing tonight with Michael Brooks of the Majority Report. Progressive Army, this is the Benjamin Dixon Show. Let's do this.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
we are now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome. It's the Benjamin. I thought I heard my voice over anyway. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Wednesday night, February 10th, 2016. There I go. I probably will mess up the date every day for at least the next 2 weeks. Once I mess it up one time, I'm bound to mess it up again over and over again. Tonight, I'll be joined by Michael Brooks of the Majority Report. He'll be joining me to discuss the New Hampshire results. We'll be discussing the fracture in the Democratic Party, along with a bevy of other topics. So he'll be joining me by phone shortly. So we're glad to have him. We're also going to discuss all the things that I mentioned in the lead. This today by itself has shaped up to be one of the most, today is all about the black vote. And Hillary Clinton is unashamedly making it all about the black vote. She got pounced. Let's start at the beginning. She got pounced in New Hampshire. I mean, there's no way to cut it. Bernie Sanders thrashed her. I mean, in almost every single demographic, Bernie Sanders was victorious. I don't know if there's really anything else to say about it, except for that we didn't cover last night. One thing I do want to point out that we mentioned last night, and I want to just kind of mention again because it's noteworthy, right? Expectations were intentionally set low for Hillary Clinton once they realized that they were going to lose. They started playing the expectations game. And then they started building up the expectations of Bernie Sanders, saying that he has to win at least by 8 points for it to be a meaningful victory. Well, if you paid attention, he won by much more than 8 points. I believe at the end of the night, it was 21 points that Bernie Sanders won by, far exceeding any expectation, utterly crushing Hillary Clinton. And now let's not get it wrong. That's just one state, right? There's 48 more states to go through. Not 48 more nights, but 48 more states that we need to go through. Some in which he's going to lose. The final victory was a 22%, according to John Stephen Frank in the chat room, 22% margin of victory in New Hampshire. That's insane. That is ridiculous. And there is no way to write this except for the fact that Hillary Clinton is in trouble. Now, do I think it's over for her? By far, no, not even close. Hillary Clinton still has a chance, and we're going to discuss one of her strategies to try to stay alive. Right? We touched on it a little bit last night, but I want to discuss it a little bit more. She basically sent out for the cavalry. That's what Hillary Clinton is. She called in her reinforcements, and we'll discuss that. I don't want to go into that right now, but last night it was a thrashing. John Kasich came in a strong second place. On the Republican side, Donald Trump, of course, came in number one. Notable today, Chris Christie and Carly Fiorina both dropped out of the race. It was hilarious that Chris Christie dropped out of the race after he stayed in long enough to eat Marco Rubio for lunch, right? He stayed in just long enough to destroy Marco Rubio, and then he dipped, right? He really, I wonder how long it's going to take everyone else to drop out. Ben Carson came in at like 2%. It's time for him to go. Everyone, he was the flavor of the week over the summer. That's it for him. He needs to go. Bernie Sanders won in every demographic group. This is not, he won amongst women. He won the plurality of the youth vote. Millennials, he crushed Hillary Clinton in again. This was a very strong showing. And the fact that he had more voter turnout than Donald Trump and John Kasich combined. If you want to talk about the enthusiasm and the enthusiasm gap, rather, there is not an enthusiasm gap for Bernie Sanders. It's not. People are showing up. Now, if he carries the same type of momentum, the same type of energy across the country, you are genuinely looking at what he wants to call a political revolution. I think last night people really got a taste of the reality that this revolution might actually be taking place. And I think there's a little disillusionment, right, with some people who don't expect a revolution to come in a political form. But when you consider the alternative, there's really no alternative. You're not going to have a revolution through a violent revolution in the United States of America. The only revolution that you're going to get in the United States of America is through elections. And seeing the type of turnout that Bernie Sanders had last night, speaking from a genuine left perspective, right? He's the furthest left candidate that we've seen in a very, in my lifetime. Someone who's vying to be the actual candidate for the Democratic Party in my lifetime. He's the most progressive candidate that we've ever had. And his language is that of revolution. His language is that of overturning the status quo. And he's overturning the status quo because of all of the big guns that Hillary Clinton has pulled out as a result of last night. So last night we got wind of a memo that went around. We discussed it last night, and I'll discuss it a little bit more. We got wind of a memo that Hillary Clinton's team sent around, essentially saying that, don't worry, everybody, we've got the black vote. And so long as we have the black vote, we'll be okay because of the black firewall. Not their exact words, but that's the sentiment. And then inside of this, they also try to lay the groundwork. Not the groundwork, they try to lay the framework and the map that would be necessary for them to be able to drive a wedge between the black community and Bernie Sanders, even further than the wedge they've already pushed. And that was, they need to make sure that everyone knows, right, as if it's a statement of fact versus an accusation, that everyone knows that Bernie Sanders is running against President Obama. And we saw that last night with a former Philadelphia official on CNN with Van Jones, where he took almost word for word this memo that was circulated to the media and Hillary Clinton surrogates, which said, make sure everyone knows that Bernie Sanders is running against President Obama. And make sure everyone knows how good Hillary Clinton has been to the black community. That was the essence of the memo. And the purpose of the memo was to rally all of her black supporters, all of her black surrogates, and give them the ammunition necessary to drive a wedge between Bernie Sanders and the black community, such that if Hillary Clinton loses in all the white states, none of the white people want her, then she'll be fine in the southern states because of the black firewall. And so you saw everybody move into action. They moved directly into action. Last night, you see all of these black political figures, all of these black media elite who are just carrying this token line. Gawker actually put out, I retweeted something from Gawker this morning, which showed an image of a memo from Hillary Clinton sitting next to an article from a news outlet that was using the exact language of Hillary Clinton's memo. And so if the question was, if you ever wonder how Hillary Clinton gets this favorable coverage, it's because these reporters are taking almost word for word from the memo that Hillary Clinton's team sends around at sundry times. And last night, she sent around the memo talking about Bernie Sanders opposing President Obama, Bernie Sanders running against President Obama's record, and how Hillary Clinton wants to maintain and sustain and expand upon President Obama's record. And then lo and behold, on CNN, you get this ex-Philadelphia official. I can't remember his name. Don't really care to repeat it. But even if I did know it, basically regurgitating, vomiting up the same token line. And then you see people go across the Twitter sphere. They're scared. And they should be. they should be scared with the type of results that they got last night. And the fact that Bernie Sanders was able to give a speech from the position of not just a possible candidate, but a fierce contender. He was able to give a speech from the position of strength instead of a position of maybe he'll make it. Last night, he was able to give a speech from the position of, oh, you didn't realize we're going to do this. And that makes all of the difference. And that places fear. And last night, he raised $5 million in one 24-hour period. Bernie Sanders, when he did his fundraiser live on air last night, he raised $5 million. Act Blue shut down. He crashed the service there. They weren't even able to process all the money on Bernie Sanders' website because people really are catching wind of the potential of this revolution. Now, here's what Hillary Clinton needs Black people to do. Hillary Clinton needs Black people to believe that they have more in common with her as an older white woman than they do with Bernie Sanders as an older white man. That's number one. And nobody's going to outright say this, right? But if you listen to a lot of the Hillary feminist support group, I guess I just made up something there. The Hillary feminist support group. If you listen to them, they are communicating in these beautiful overtones of intersectionality that they've never talked in before, right? All of a sudden, they're genuinely concerned about Bernie Sanders erasing the plight of a certain segment. Anytime you hear somebody talking about erasure, that's essentially intersectional feminism, which is a valid critique of most situations. It's valid where you by not mentioning the different facets of a movement, you're erasing the plight of the movement. So I agree with a lot of intersectional feminism, but what is amazing to me is how many Hillary Clinton supporters who have most of the time just completely disregarded intersectionality, all of a sudden they're magically concerned with this white man erasing all of the plight of women of color and Black people and people of color. And all of a sudden they're so genuinely concerned about race issues when they were never concerned about it before this. When not only were they not concerned about it, but in 2008, they actually played the race card against Barack Obama. So I think it's hilarious to see all of these people just rushing to do the bidding of Hillary Clinton. And I'm wondering at what point will people realize all of this is just a game to them. All of this is just to get the vote and to control the Black vote. Hillary Clinton can't even get the white women voters in New Hampshire. She lost the white women vote in all demographics. The only demographic that Hillary Clinton won was the over 200,000 a year demographic. Everything else went to Bernie Sanders. And so she sent out this memo essentially saying, don't worry, folks, if the white people don't want me, I've got the Black vote on lock. To which Michelle Alexander so poignantly released her article today, basically saying why Hillary Clinton doesn't deserve the Black vote. And so many things happened between last night and this morning and today's show, rather, that really put a dent in this presumption of a firewall from the Black community. The firewall in itself was insulting, but the presumption of the firewall was even more condescending. And we see just that firewall is slowly but surely coming down. All right. We'll talk about Michelle Alexander a little bit more. I'm going to be joined shortly by Michael Brooks of the Majority Report. I want to talk about the divide inside of the Democratic Party, particularly we are seeing, and I discussed this last night on Twitter, we are seeing a breakdown in class in the Democratic Party. Right. We're seeing the breakdown based on not your race, not your gender, none of your identity, but basically your class. And we see that Hillary Clinton and the establishment, they really do represent a certain class of people who are doing just fine in this status quo. A lot of these media elite are Ivy Leaguers who are doing just fine, which is one of the things one of the problems I have with Ta-Nehisi Coates, which I'm glad he's supporting Bernie Sanders, but we'll talk about him still a little bit more after I speak with Michael. But you have Hillary Clinton rolling out a lot of people who don't identify with your economic plight. They just have the same skin color as you. They don't identify with your political plight because they have all the connections in the world. They just have the same gender as you. But if they can get you to focus only on your race, only on your gender, only on your orientation, but pay no attention to the class analysis, the class divisions, the different experiences in America based on where you are economically, if they can get you to ignore that, then of course you have every reason to vote for Hillary Clinton. Sure. If you just want to look at it through the lens of I'm a woman, you can vote for Hillary Clinton. If you want to look at it through the lens of I'm black and that's it, and there's nothing else that matters except the fact that I'm black and there's racism in America, then fine. You may as well vote for Hillary Clinton, even though Bernie Sanders is still stronger on race issues than Hillary Clinton. But I digress. The point is, if you're going to look through your political experience through the myopic lens of one dimension, it's fine to look through the lens of your identity, but inside of your identity, there are different nuances. There are different dimensions to your experience. Case in point, my experience, let's say Oprah Winfrey is a Democrat, right? Which she voted Democrat last in 2012, 2008. Then my experience is entirely different as a black Democrat in America who is middle class than the experience of a black Democrat in America who's in the top 1%. So there is a class analysis that needs to take place. And if they can convince you to just throw that to the side, don't worry about where you are economically, just worry about the fact that Hillary Clinton is going to be good with the blacks, and she's going to be good with the women, and she's going to be good on LGBTQ, but don't worry about the economic component, then of course, then fine. I guess if you don't have any economic problems in America, then hell, you might as well vote for the Republican Party. And what's sad is that there is a requirement for you to ignore the economic analysis in order to justify you supporting Hillary Clinton. When as a Democrat and as a progressive, she should be championing all the more these issues. It shouldn't just be Bernie Sanders. There should be no difference in their economic platform, but there is. There should be no difference in their desire to raise the minimum wage as high as they possibly can justify, but there is. There should be no difference in the progressive tax code that they want to reinstate, but there is. And because there is, you have to understand that there is a difference between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, and that difference is most exposed when we discuss economics, or really it's only exposed when we discuss economic differences and platforms and policies. And so they get these Ivy Leaguers on TV to tell you about okay, I'm ready for you, Mike, anytime. And I just want to make sure I know I'm ranting, but I'm ready for you anytime you're ready. They put these people on television to talk to you about your plight as a woman, but not talk to you about your plight as a middle class woman, or your plight as a poor working class woman, or a woman in poverty, or a woman of color in poverty. Each of those are uniquely different experiences that are erased underneath Hillary Clinton. Underneath Hillary Clinton, you got women and you have women of color, but no conversation about women of color and poverty whatsoever. With Hillary Clinton, you can have conversations about racism in America. She'll talk about racism in America finally, after 30 years of helping build the racist infrastructure. She'll talk about it, of course, but she's not going to talk about the economic component thereof and the economic impetus behind racism and white supremacy and the things that we need to do to unravel it economically. So you could be black and you could talk about white supremacy, but you better not talk about class structure and the different experiences between let's say a Ben Dixon and a Jonathan Capehart. And those are the dynamic differences we see in the party across the board, not just based on identity, but based on the party as a whole. And I was having this conversation with Michael Brooks of the Majority Report last week on Twitter, and we were just laughing. He sent me a video where he was discussing you have these new type of Democrats who will rob a pension fund, but still call themselves a Democrat and a progressive because they support marriage equality. I've got Michael Brooks on the line. Michael, how's it going?
It's going great, man. It's good to be talking with you. You're covering everything.
Yeah, man. I'm covering everything, and I was trying to throw it back to our original conversation. First of all, thanks so much for joining me, man. It's a pleasure. Michael Brooks of the Majority Report. You guys can see him over on Sam Cedars, the Majority Report channel. He's there. You're there every day, right?
Yeah, I'm there every day. I host it on Mondays, and I'm there every day, co-hosting and co-anchoring it. And also, I just got to plug it because I'm excited about it. I have another podcast that's going to be launching really soon, like by either the last month of February or first week of March, called Two Dope Boys and a Podcast. I'm doing it with my friend Phil McKenzie, and that's coming soon as well.
Okay, so it's Two Dope Boys and a Podcast.
That's correct.
Awesome. And your partner's name again is Sean McKenzie?
Phil McKenzie.
Phil McKenzie. I'm horrible with names. Yeah. I will mess up a name every single time. So we should keep our eyes out for that coming up at the end of this month, possibly at the beginning of next month. Awesome, man. So we'll definitely love to have you guys on the show, and vice versa. So listen, before we jump into our conversation that we had about the new type of Democrats, just tell everybody a little bit more about yourself. I know you told them about the podcast or anything else. I'm sure they know you, because if they know me, they probably are watching everything on YouTube. But go ahead and tell them a little bit about yourself before we get into it.
I'm a Leo. You know, I've been and actually it is true though, by the way, I'm a Leo. I've been working at the Majority Report for a couple of years now, and doing that work with Sam. You could see me on other places like, Al Jazeera, HuffPost Live, written for a bunch of different places, Al Monitor, Al Jazeera, Washington Post. I've done a lot of foreign policy stuff. And then, as far as sort of like getting into this work, I became politically active when I was like a teenager, actually. I went to, and I probably shouldn't say this could jeopardize my political career if I choose to have one, but when I was 15 years old, I went to Philadelphia to march for Mumia Abu Jamal. And which was, I don't remember me and this other little white dude, little hippie. We were up from Massachusetts, and we were getting guarded by the fruit of Islam when we marched around Philly, which was hilarious.
Wow, you started off radical, man. You started off early. Wow.
To be honest, when I was really young, like 12, 13, 14, I was a pretty bad kid. I was kind of precocious in some ways. I read a lot, but I also was a very consistent and steady rule breaker by any sort of way you could, any rule you provided me with, I needed to break.
Right.
So I think in some ways when that sort of connected with politics, the impulse was, well, it's got to be the most radical thing.
Yeah.
And so that continued, and through all these other iterations and a bunch of other things I've done, that's actually stuck with me in some ways. And before I went to college, I ran an arts nonprofit and event platform with some buddies, and that also is a thread of kind of like empowering community and solving situations from the bottom up. So those are some fragments. Give you a flavor of me. Maybe we'll contextualize some of my Nation of Islam Obama impressions on the Majority Report as well.
Yes, it does bring some context to your impersonations. Now that you mention it, it really does. All right, so let's come up from that, and let's talk about some of the things we talked about over Twitter. And I think we saw it We saw it in New Hampshire, right? Hillary Clinton,
Yes.
The only demographic that she won was with progressive that made over $200,000 a year. And we were joking online, like I said this last week on the show, that you don't get a pass. You can't call, in my opinion, you can't call yourself a progressive anymore just because you support marriage equality and a woman's right to choose, right? To me, that's like the baseline. That's the level of entry just to be a decent human being. And then you shared your video with me from the Majority Report, which was a great video discussing how by day you have these so-called progressives who are gutting pension funds, and then by night they're supporting women's rights and women and marriage equality. So, you know, tell me more about what you think in that regard, the divide that's in the imminent divide inside of the Democratic Party and the results from last night.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely on target. I think of three things. That video was about debunking this Bernie Bros myth, which has been really annoying me and a lot of other people. And the point of that video and the point you raised is that, first of all, it's not good enough anymore. And you've made this point very explicitly yourself, to be essentially, socially liberal and not economically progressive, not economically left. In my view, we need to get to the point where we realize that when someone like Michael Bloomberg, who sure has done some good things on climate change and has some social liberalism, when he compares the fight for 15 to communism, that is just as crazy and insane as anything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth.
Right, absolutely.
And that's the reality. And, so one point, sir.
I had to applaud you, man. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm with it. I like to hear it outside of my own head as well. But the second point is that it was specifically with regards to this race between Bernie and Hillary. But as you've been pointing out, and what I really appreciate about your work is this is a much larger scope than just this presidential race. Although I do really like and admire Bernie Sanders, frankly. But this really bizarre dynamic in which some people on the right of the Democratic Party, and by which the right, I'm just defining it, if you're supporting Hillary Clinton now, you're on the right side of this divide,
absolutely,
just in the context of this race, are using arguments that are, as an example, when I saw people sort of sharing a Ta-Nehisi Coates piece criticizing Bernie Sanders on reparations, that's a conversation for another day. But the point is as a way to support Hillary Clinton. Now, look, we can debate reparations, but that's enraging to me. I mean, we can go back to their records. Bernie Sanders never called black teenagers super predators. Bernie Sanders voted against welfare reform. Bernie Sanders said it played to our worst and most xenophobic instincts. So I think what we have is this bizarre way in which a very left critique sometimes is emerging almost from like a counterpunch article as a prop to support the more right-wing candidate. That's disingenuous. And then number three, there's a knockoff intersectionality, which, look, frankly, I mean, I think we always got to kind of interrogate ourselves, be aware. And I'm aware that, obviously I'm not a woman. I don't go through that experience, but I have seen, articles trying to actually elevate the fact that, Bernie Sanders doesn't use gender neutral pronouns enough as somehow really warranting a critique of him. And all I would say is, okay, if that's going to warrant a critique of him, then I'm going to be a lot less generous when I kind of, don't talk about the death penalty. I don't talk about welfare reform. I don't talk about NAFTA because, I think a lot of us are actually being very supportive of Bernie, but pretty easy on Hillary on the course of this race until these attacks just got so disingenuous that we needed to sort of hit back.
No, you hit that on the head. Like, how do you take a Ta-Nehisi Coates piece that criticizes and rightfully so, right? In the proper context, it's a conversation that Bernie Sanders really needs to have with himself, right? But how do you take that piece and then use it as a means of supporting Hillary Clinton? It just doesn't follow, right? And then I love what you said about this illusion, really, essentially, of intersectionality, where it becomes tokenism, and that's what I call it. Like, how many gender neutral pronouns are you using? How many times are you dividing up women into women of color, people of color, transgender women, and transgender women of color? Basically, are you hitting all the checkpoints? but then are you really dismissing the substance thereof, right? How do you go against Bernie Sanders for not using the proper language when his policies are going to be far more beneficial? Is it more important to you that he speaks precisely politically correct, or is it more important to you that Hillary Clinton's policies are actually going to be detrimental to transgender women of color in a certain economic class?
Yeah, exactly. And I also think the other problem that's emerging is that, and look, this is a really specialized conversation in some ways, but this whole kind of backlash against quote unquote PC culture or whatever is overblown. And there's always going to be a backlash in some respects, because there's always going to be people that, what that really means is they're like, oh, fuck, man, I can't. Oh, I'm sorry. I hope I can swear.
No problem. Go for it, man. It's all good.
Yeah, they're going to say, oh, I can't, say what I want about, Black people, Puerto Rican people, women, whatever. I mean, we all know what that means.
Right.
But at the same time, there is a sort of obsessive attention on language and getting all of your specs correct, which frankly is just objectively can be alienating to a larger audience that you're trying to persuade. And what I see that's really much more than deeply problematic than that, with regards to how it's manifesting around some of the supporters of Hillary Clinton's campaign, is there's this sort of fusion of, on one hand, this sort of kind of self-caricature joke of a kind of, certain type of political correctness, almost, a caricature of the critique that people are enacting themselves, fused with an apology for essentially, policies that, if we're going to be really blunt about it, are, medieval level and beyond levels of inequality, policies that are incompatible with, the future of life on Earth being sort of viable, and military and foreign policies that are, if we were going to be a little bit more cautious, we could say that they're deeply destabilizing, to say the least. So if we're going to turn around and liberalism is going to mean for people in a general and popular sense, I need to remember each exact spec of talking about people in this very specific way, and then that's sort of fused with another trade deal that shipped my job, and another kind of SEC that isn't going to hold Goldman in check, and another bombing campaign that kills a lot of civilians and doesn't achieve a strategic objective. That is, that's like, I forget who said this, but there's the phrase of like, that's as appealing as high calorie broccoli. Nobody wants that.
You really just hit on that. I don't know that if I could say it better, but I just want to repeat what you said, because I need to hear it come out of my own mouth at this point. It's this obsessive attention to dotting every I and crossing every T, which to a certain extent I could buy into that. Fine, I'm up for it, right? But when that obsessive attention points you to a person who can match your need for that detail, wrap it on top of policies that are detrimental to human society, then at what point are you willing to exchange this political correctness for economic policies that are exacerbating inequality, for trade policies that are going to just ravish the labor class and the middle class, the foreign policies that, like you said, if we're going to be just modest with it, is destabilizing, to say the least? Are you willing to put all of your focus on the fact that Hillary Clinton can dot every I, which she can't, by the way, she can't. But
that's another point.
The fact that Bernie Sanders may not do it as well as she does it makes her that much more attractive to you. But by the way, yeah, go ahead. She can't herself.
No, I think not only that, I think actually this is another, that sort of turns into a broader critique, and I think important conversation to have on the left, that actually is, because in many ways, a lot of the debates that we have today, in my view, are between a deep and smart intersectionality, which I will use that word for this audience because it's obviously a very smart and specialized audience. I try not to lead with that word necessarily, but a smart and deep intersectionality and a knockoff tokenism, Twitter intersectionality that nobody needs.
Come on, man.
And those are the big distinctions. And I have to say, not only, Bernie Sanders, look, there are two important points. First of all, he does this a lot better than he gets credit for in general, and he's open to learning and growing. I was critical, you know, on the flip side, when Black Lives Matter called him out in the summer, we had a lot of people on the majority report who were upset, who didn't like that he got disrupted. And we were like, no, this is good for everybody. This is good for him.
Yeah.
If he's going to get better on this issue and talking about it, and it's good for a profoundly important movement that transcends an election cycle. But the second important point is that, you know, if there's one specific issue that is completely underrepresented in any type of aware discourse in American politics, it's the discussion of class.
Yeah.
And it's a profoundly important thing to have a class-oriented politician in the center of our politics. There's an enormous innate gain from that. And if you're a deep intersectionalist, you know that class is, you know that, again, you're going to talk about, go to the frontiers of sexual liberation rights. You want to talk about transgender rights. If you know, deep intersectionality is Paris is burning. Knockoff intersectionality is Caitlyn Jenner. And that's the distinction.
God damn it, man. That was good. That was good. I'm
a Leo. I'll keep taking it.
Yeah, no. You nailed that one. We definitely have to check out Two Dope Boys and a podcast. Let me circle back to one last thing before I let you go. You guys actually defended Black Lives Matter when I turned on Black Lives Matter. We were both, I watched your podcast about Black Lives Matter protesting at Netroots Nation, and we were on the same page. I'm like, this is going to be good for Bernie. This is going to be, you know, I think who was it? Cenk Uygur. I think he was on the opposite side of the coin for Netroots Nation, and a couple other YouTube commentators from the left, they were on the opposite side. But you guys were on the same page that I was with Netroots Nation. Seattle, however, I was like, they need to sit down somewhere. They don't have a coherent strategy. It wasn't productive. You know, what was the purpose of, you know, why were they there? And then I tuned into you guys and you were like, you know, hey, you know, it's an important conversation. We need to have it. And, you know, when is a good time? When is a good time for us to have this conversation? You know, and I was like, you know, I still think that they were wrong, but I just think it is noteworthy that you guys still supported this important conversation, even to the discomfort of Seattle. But yet and still, if you have any critique of Hillary Clinton, I'm quite sure you've also been called a Bernie bro.
Oh, I've been called a Bernie bro a lot. And dude, I totally am. Because, you know, my main commitments in politics are giving everybody health care and making sure that girls don't need anything. No, I'm just playing. No, obviously I've been called it. It's totally ludicrous. I think, you know, with Black Lives Matter, I agree with you. I did think, and I said at the time, the thing in Seattle was a lot less clear to me. You know, how I had criticisms of it. But first of all, again, you know, in this kind of intersectionality conversation, I'm going to be aware of, you know, of my position when I'm talking about these issues, and that's just reality. And then number two, I mean, I think that the other thing that happens a lot is if what had happened in Seattle just happened and that was it, I probably would have been much more likely to be like, you need a better strategy, that, you know, let the man speak at a certain point, like all of those things, which I think are very valid criticisms of that specific action. But what I found in my audience was that, you know, there's a lot of people kind of getting on the sort of like, you know, don't these people know that Bernie is good for them train, which Bernie has never said. He never conveyed anything like that. And I have enormous respect for how he's carried himself. But that position is bullshit and a problem. So when that came, that's what we flipped to addressing. So that was like an internal
a housekeeping thing.
And I think we did some good with that.
Yeah, no, you guys absolutely did. And I think it speaks volumes to you guys' willingness to look internally at your audience and say, the attitude that's coming from our audience is not something that we are okay with. So we are going to bring a message that's going to bring a course correction to our own audience, even if we lose some of our audience. And I did the same thing, like with my position on Black Lives Matter is that I support you guys so much. I have to bring the proper criticism based on Seattle, because some of my listeners who are also Black Lives Matter supporters, I want everyone to understand there are nuances to every situation. No situation is a clear cut black or white. This guy is evil. That guy is good. This woman is good. That guy is evil. Nothing ever exists like that. So I want to applaud you guys for having that intellectual honesty and intellectual flexibility over there. And I'm quite sure you guys are going to do the same with Two Dope Boys and the podcast. Am I correct?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, Two Dope Boys, I should say, you know, Phil is one of my closest, dearest friends. He runs a company called Influencer Conference, and he's lifelong. His family's from Guyana and Barbados, and he grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up in Massachusetts, and we have these dissimilar backgrounds and experiences, but we're really similar. And that show is going to be about culture, brands, art, trends, and politics.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to get at a lot of these conversations from a different angle. Like, an example, we had a conversation recently about hip hop and nation branding. We had a conversation about Nike, quote unquote, mining ghetto culture, and how does the NBA branded, and the stories we tell through sneakers and brands. So it's a different type of conversation, but it gets to the same points, and I'm really excited about it.
Michael, I'm so glad that you joined us tonight, man. I'm looking forward to speaking with you again, and just tell everybody how to get up with you. I'm sure they already know, but just for good housekeeping, how do they get up with you?
Yes, follow me. Websites are coming soon, but right now, follow me at _Michael Brooks, at _Michael Brooks on Twitter, majority.fm, and then at YouTube at /Sam Cedar. We're on every day, noon live, Eastern time, from noon to about 1:30 or 2, and then we, you know, everything's cut up on YouTube, and you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes at The Majority Report. But I really, really want to thank you for having me on, man. It's a pleasure. You're doing great work, and it's really an honor and a privilege, and I look forward to talking with you on and off there soon.
Sounds good, man. Thanks so much for coming on, and tell everyone at The Majority Report we said what's up from the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Absolutely. Be well, man. Good night. Good
night. You be well as well. That's Michael Brooks of The Majority Report, and soon to be the Two Dope Boys and a podcast. So I want to pick up the conversation right where he left off. You can join in 857-600-0518. I want you to do more talking tonight. I'm almost there, folks. The dentist said it's going to take me about 3 weeks to heal from this procedure, just so that you can kind of get a picture of what happened and why I'm sitting here. You know, every time I put his picture on the screen, I'm putting something on my mouth so I can talk. But the dentist, get ready to cringe, right? The dentist had to saw two of my teeth, my wisdom teeth, in half in order to pull them out after 40 minutes of tugging with pliers to try to get them out. So that's why I want you to call, and I have a caller on the line. Caller, you're live on the air, 857. I'm sorry, you already know the number. You called in. This is the Benjamin Dixon Show. What's your name, comment, and/or question?
This is Umar from Brooklyn.
Brooklyn's in the house. Umar, it's always a pleasure, man. What's up?
Yes, how's it going? I kind of missed your 3-hour show, but I did watch it while I was doing work this morning.
Great. Glad you could get the rebroadcast, man. No problem.
Hey, you know, I want to speak to that Bernie Bros thing, because I hope that some kind of response is being drafted, because that's a very interesting attack, considering that we're living in a time where there's a progressive, anti-progressive battle between the type of people who the Hillary Clinton campaign is associating us with, and progressives. Because what's that kind of doing? Because I predicted they're attacking me because I'm a woman thing coming.
Yeah.
You know, she was kind of doing it, then she started doing it harder. After, I think, was it Iowa, was it?
Yep.
And then, you know, now she's full-fledged doing it there. And this Bernie Bros thing, see, I get what's being said, and I understand the argument that it is not right for either side to have a group of people who would espouse such things, you know, like calling Hillary the names, the type of things that guys on the internet do not do to women on the internet.
Right, right.
But at the same time, there's a difference, and it's a really hard difference because it's hard to say, between an overly passionate response that almost anybody could come up with anything under any circumstances, and the groups of guys who are literally doing this as some sort of an insane tactic.
Right.
The main attack is the feminists. And I would point to the Aeneas Sarkeesian thing. Now, there's a big thing about this. I know there's a huge split. And what's beginning to happen is, this is where I began to get my argument about, we've got to stop treating anti-progressives like they got a point, like what they're saying is sane or another side of the issue, because I don't see the sanity in a rape threat. I don't see the sanity in a death threat. But my point is, millennials are aware of this. You can't be on anything without bumping into it sooner or later.
Right.
And to have Bernie or Bernie supporters associated with this is, I foresee, kind of dangerous. It's something we have to figure out how to nip in the bud.
You know, I think one of the things, Umar, thanks for the call, man. The phones are lighting up tonight. Appreciate the call. I think one of the things that we do to respond to it is to, one, we have to take the air out of it. We have to take the oxygen out of it. You know, it's being overused. Yes, there is a group of Bernie, whether they're straight Bernie supporters or people who are trolling on behalf of Bernie or whatever the hell the reason they exist. Yes, there is a group, right? But it is a small, minuscule subset of the real people who support Bernie Sanders. And I think what we need to do is to do just like Michael did, and the way what I do, which is to suck the oxygen out of the attack and to take ownership of it and realize that these people that you're calling, that you are on Twitter, just calling us Bernie bros just to try to shut us down. First of all, you know, that rhetorical technique is so juvenile. It won't shut anybody down. You're not stopping anybody. All you can do is block them, right? Which is childish anyway. But you're trying to use it as a means of shutting down conversation. And to me, it's you're shutting down people who are legitimately intersectional feminists, right? Not intersectional feminists for convenience, but intersectional feminists because we understand and we have learned and we have studied and we actually agree with you 100% on intersectionality. But because we disagree with you on Hillary Clinton's type of feminism, then we're Bernie bros. That's where I think we get off. Before I take another call, I want to do this. Actually, no, I lied. I'm going to take this call since I have them on hold. And then I'm going to talk about Ta-Nehisi Coates' support for Bernie Sanders. He's going to vote for him, but he's not endorsing him. I'm talking about that next. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
719, me?
Yep, that's you. You're live. What's happening, man?
Hey, Ben. My name is Luke.
Luke.
Really quick, I just really like your show. I've been
Thanks,
listening
man.
for a while now. This is actually the first time I'm listening live because I normally listen to it the day after.
Glad to have you on board, man. What's happening?
What I really quickly wanted to touch on, especially leaping off of what you were just talking about with intersectional feminism, and I think this kind of nicely jumps off of what Michael was saying earlier, is this sort of reality that it's sort of, when a lot of people I speak with use the term white feminism to sort of front this narrative that there's like the more privileged class sort of buying into the patriarchy rather than we have this sort of like broader based capacity to acknowledge the fact that there's so many extremely poor women and disproportionately women of color who are suffering extremely. And, you know, there's this great concern on my end when we're talking about this, even though I wouldn't question Hillary's history in terms of fighting for women's rights as far as, you know, women's right to choose and things like that. I think she's been an amazing voice in that arena. But I have a concern when it's, you know, you have the Gloria Steinems of the world and you have Madeleine Albrights of the world coming in upholding this sort of powerful message that really is only reaching this rich class of white women, and upholding them to sort of be a part, you know, to like the establishment moniker, sort of that idea. So it's interesting that, you know, the terms of the conversation always hinge along the lowest hanging fruit in terms of what it is that we're seeking to do on this intersectionality.
Right. And actually you unpacked it right in the middle of what you were saying was actually the key, is that it's this willingness to be intersectional up until the point when we have a conversation about economics. Right. We're not going to parse the conversation. Fine. We'll be intersectional when it comes to women of color. And they're only, that's a ongoing fight. That fight isn't even over, right? You still have that standard erasure of the unique plight that women of color have as opposed to any other type of woman, right? And it would be great if we had, I'm sure Anoa is waiting in the wind. Anoa Changa, my Progressive Army sister, I'm sure she's waiting in the wind to come in and to address this succinctly as a woman, right? But just through observation, everything that you said is true, except the fact that we're not going to discuss, you can't complete the conversation about intersectionality unless you talk about the unique situation that poor women have, that poor women of color have, that poor transgender women of color have. There is a class dimension to every experience in America. And whether let's put feminism aside, because neither one of us are men, even though we have a decent understanding of intersectional feminism. Let's put it aside that we're men. We're not qualified to talk about it. I can talk about it in the sense of race, and you can talk about it in the sense of race. In the sense of race, for me, there's a completely different experience if you are a Black person in America who has extreme wealth. I cannot go to certain neighborhoods, and there are Black people who live in those neighborhoods. I cannot go there because I am not in the right wealth category. I can drive through, but I better keep driving, right? So there is a different experience in America, and that we have to erase that dimension of economics and class if we are going to support Hillary Clinton, because Hillary Clinton only wants to take that conversation so far. She does not want to have a full-fledged conversation about class and class analysis, because that is going to require her to turn coat on some of her top supporters, which is Wall Street. Hey, Luke, man, thanks so much for your call. I got to grab the rest of these calls.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. 857-600-0518. I actually just missed a couple. I want to play this from, and no, listen, just to be clear, I'm not a woman. I am not an expert on feminism by any measure of the imagination. I don't pretend to be able to speak on it, but I do have quite a bit of knowledge on the different experiences that you can have in America, regardless of your particular identity. And I know that my experience in America as a Black man is uniquely different than an experience of an America of a Black woman. But I also know that a Black woman who's in the top 1% or in the top 25% has a different experience than I do. And so if you understand and you look through the world through those lenses, that just because we have the same gender, just because we have the same skin color, just because we have the same political affiliation, doesn't mean that we can talk about each other as a monolith, because all of us have different experiences. And the erasure that must happen for you to be able to support Hillary Clinton is the erasure of class. And we normally wouldn't be able to say that if it was just Hillary Clinton versus a Martin O'Malley, because both of them erase class. But it's Hillary Clinton versus Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders brings a unique perspective on the conversation of class analysis in America. And so now we rightfully so can critique Hillary Clinton and say that her policies on race, her policies on economics, her policies on feminism, her policies on LGBT rights, they pale in comparison when we break it down based on the dimension of class. And thankfully, we have Bernie Sanders to thank for that. Otherwise, we would be just talking the same exact conversation without any reference to class whatsoever. All right, let me grab this call. I'm going to place you on hold while I talk about Ta-Nehisi Coates, because he's done something. He said that he's going to vote for Bernie Sanders, but then I'll show you what he said on Twitter later. This is from Democracy Now! Hopefully I won't get a copyright infringement, but I want you to see his expression. You have to see his expression to understand why it's worth talking about.
And he took to Twitter to defend Sanders after you criticized him for not supporting reparations. Killer Mike tweeted, "The truth of my support is this. I am pro-reparations for any people used and abused like blacks have been here and other places." And quote, "I believe the government of this country will never do this, but I can have a POTUS who will be open to a federal loan program to help." And quote, "Candidate that I think would be most sensitive to the very accomplishable goal and the other things that will help black people is Sanders."
Okay, let me stop it there just so I can mess with Google's algorithm and to set it up again. So she's talking to Ta-Nehisi Coates and she's giving Killer Mike's rebuttal to Ta-Nehisi Coates' first criticism of Bernie Sanders. You guys are smart. You followed along. You know exactly what's happening. But let me just pretend like I needed to explain it again so I could stop it at 30 seconds and start it again. Here we go.
That's Killer Mike.
There's actually very little in that statement right there that I disagree with. One can be very, very critical of Senator Sanders on this specific issue. One can say Senator Sanders should have more, explicit anti-racist policy within his racial justice platform, not just more general stuff, and still cast a vote for Senator Sanders and still feel that Senator Sanders is the best option that we have in the race. But just because that's who you're going to vote for doesn't mean you then have to agree with everything they say.
Will you be voting for Senator Sanders?
I will be voting for Senator Sanders. I have tried to avoid this question, but yes, I will be voting for Senator Sanders. I try to avoid that because I want to write as a journalist, you know what I mean, and separate that from my role as, I don't know, a private citizen.
I don't know either.
I don't think much is accomplished by ducking the question. Yes, I will vote for Senator Sanders. My son influenced me.
Yeah. Blame it on your son. All right, so I guess we can applaud him. He's voting for Senator Sanders. Yeah. Then he took to Twitter. And gave this all of these equivocations explaining why he's supporting Bernie Sanders and why we shouldn't get excited about him. Well, hell, Ta-Nehisi, don't worry. I didn't get excited in the first place. The reason I didn't get excited in the first place was because, well, I'll explain why. Once I want you to read it in his own words. I'm pulling it up on my Twitter. Oh my good God, my tooth hurts. I'm bringing it up on Twitter now. But essentially, he's saying, as I pull it up and I filibuster, he says that he's not, he only announced that because he doesn't want to dodge questions when he's made a career of keeping people from dodging questions. And he says, let's read them for you. So he says, actually, I can start here. "And given that I generally go after people for just those sorts of evasions, I don't think it was much else to do here but admit." He said, "But that's me, the citizen. Me, the writer, doesn't speak for anyone else and doesn't intend to try to sway anyone else." Okay. I wish my mouth was working good here. As a writer, I don't intend to speak for anyone else, and I don't intend to sway or try to sway anyone else. I know you can have a million reasons to write, but let's not pretend, Ta-Nehisi, that your words don't have the effect of speaking for other people and persuading the people. All right, let's just dispel with the pretense. Everything that we do as public figures, even me in my microcosm of a platform, I speak for other people because the words I say resonate with other people. It's not that I'm putting words in their mouth. It's that the words that are coming out of my mouth line up with what they've already been thinking. So I do speak for other people. Number two, as we speak, we have the ability to sway other people. And so when you wrote your piece about Bernie Sanders and reparations, you can claim that you weren't trying to sway people, but it has the effect of swaying people. And for you to hide and to chase around and to all these evasive maneuvers over why you are going to vote for Bernie Sanders. But at the end, he says, this is what he says. Addendum. No reason to be particularly excited about my personal vote. I'm still going to keep writing like I'm writing. So yeah, this ain't feeling the burn. It's just trying to be a decent citizen and as transparent as I can be. Really? Where's my clip? You know, no, that's not.
So you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
If you're going to, this is the bigger thing. The bigger thing is there's this game that people in public positions try to play, and they try to ride the fence as long as they possibly can and never reveal their hand as to who they endorse. This allows them to do the bidding of whatever they feel like doing the bidding that particular day, right? They're not necessarily doing the bidding of some master. They're just doing the bidding of whatever they feel like doing sometimes. But then it also allows another group of people to say, I'm never going to endorse anyone. All I have to do is attack X. And by attacking X, that's going to do the same job as if I supported Y. Let me make it more clear. I don't have to attack, I don't have to endorse Hillary Clinton. All I have to do is attack Bernie Sanders. And by attacking Bernie Sanders, that's going to have the same effect as supporting Hillary Clinton. And so this idea that you want to keep your support for a candidate private, even though you want to wade into the political discourse around a candidate, to me is highly disingenuous. Now, you could do whatever you want to do. I'm not telling him he has to do anything. He doesn't have to be excited about it, and we're not excited about it. Whatever. You support Bernie Sanders. Whoop-de-doo, but you're not going to endorse. Let me read the rest of his statement. I'm not just saying this. Because I put people on the spot, blah, 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 seem to be done. Against endorsements. This is the, hang on, where is it? Oh, well, that was it. So yeah, this ain't feeling the burn. So he made it clear, I'm not endorsing Bernie Sanders. I'm just going to vote for Bernie Sanders. And then you had all of the people on his timeline saying, man, you should have just kept that to yourself. You should have just kept that. Enough with the games already. If you support the man and you want to hold him more accountable, then just do that. You don't have to go and stomp for him, but don't pretend as though your words that you write in your platform with millions of people reading you is not one in which you have the effect of speaking for people and changing the opinions of people. That's number one. And then number two, you know, I guess just for me, where I'm from in the South, we say what we mean and we mean what we say. We're not going to halfway support you. If we're with you, we're with you. And that's why I stopped a long time ago from when people ask me, who am I supporting in the election? I would just say, I'm going to support whoever the progressive is. That was my way of getting around the question. Enough of that. It's time out for that, because we're at a very pivotal stage where you need to make it clear, what side do you fall on in this great divide that is emerging in the Democratic Party? Are people who lean left? You know, it's not even about the party so much as it is people leaning left. Are you falling on the side that doesn't want to have the conversation about class? Or are you saying it's time that we finally have conversations about class in America, and it's time that we start doing things to support to help poor people move into the middle class and help sustain and grow the middle class even further? And then, of course, Michelle Alexander got in the conversation, but I'm running low on juice. I may not be able to get to Michelle. 517, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Hello.
Yo, you're live. What's happening, man?
You know, I actually study a lot of history and philosophy and stuff like that. And so I wanted to help contribute to the thought you were having and what you were trying to figure out earlier as far as what it was we were going up against. Okay, so the divide is between liberalism versus authoritarianism. So libertarian versus authoritarian. You actually go to politicalcompass.org. You can see the divide and where it affects everyone. And so the reason Bernie Sanders isn't the extreme progressive that everyone wants to make him out to be is because he's actually, in international terms, a centrist.
Mm-hmm.
He's not like Joe Stein, who is actually the international, very libertarian, very left-leaning person. Right. And so the divide between the feminists on our side, which are for a good portion of them, sex positive, libertarian, want free rights and protection, versus authoritarian, which wants control, very prudish feminism, which is the ones that were pro-war, because Albert, the person who was saying, if you don't support women, you'll go straight to hell. This was someone who also did back, he did back war.
Cool.
Now, when it comes to these feminists, and this is how you can tell they're distracting you. They're trying to distract people with these social issues. That's the point. That's why we call them establishment. They're trying to control the populace, and so they also have authoritarian minions in which they convince to do pretty much whatever they want.
What was your name again?
William.
Liam or William?
Will.
Great. I hear your points. And I agree with some of them. I can't say I agree with all of them, but let me, I've got to get out of here, man. I can't even finish this call good. So thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate it, folks. There was some jewel. There was about, I would say 50% of what he said was something that was meaningful. But I just don't have time or the energy to break it apart tonight. Everything else did I go over enough? Did I go over at least enough that I covered? It's not clickbait. I hope you guys got your money's worth. I'm going to bed, folks. I can't even do it. This is the Benjamin Dixon Show. It's been real. I'll catch you tomorrow night. We're out.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Crazy mother.
If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.